And so, first of all, welcome back to Plant Families and Our Foods. It's really good to have you all today. Before we get started, I'll invite folks to put into the chat if you feel up to it. Um, let's see here, where you're calling in from, and one plant that is special to you for whatever reason. It can be for any reason you like. Maybe it's special because it's, in your family. Maybe it's a particular plant you visit often, or somebody you grew, or just a plant that you love to eat, or or a holiday plant, anything. Where you're from and one plant that is special to you. Welcome or welcome back to Plant Families in Our Foods, Series 1. Um, this is our fifth class, but again, you don't need to have come to the other classes in order to be at this one. I try to make each of them as beginner friendly as possible, and it's really lovely to have all of you here with me today. Um, I will let people know that this particular family is a bit of a doozy, but that's not something scary necessarily. That just means that we get to work extra hard to make this one our friend. Um, and a reminder to folks as well that our purpose in this class is not to memorize a ton of plant facts or like have to cram all of this knowledge into our heads. It's more to get some practice in how we see plants, looking at plants. So that way it's a little bit easier for us to befriend them when we go out and meet plants we don't know. So I hope that this is fun for everybody, instead of stressful. That's my hope for our class. Alrighty, I'm going to grab up my presentation now. Let us see here. Where did it go? All right, here we go. As usual, we'll begin with three family members, and we will sketch what we can for 2 minutes, and then have an additional minute to add any words and numbers to our drawings. Um, Reminder, you don't have to draw it perfectly. That's why we only take 2 minutes. If this is overwhelming, my tips to you would be to draw small or to only draw part of it. You don't have to draw every detail. It's okay to do a zoom in and just do one detail instead of all of them. Um, 2 minutes starting now. About 30 more seconds. And there's our first 2 minutes. Now we'll take 1 extra minute to add any words, describing words, questions, observations it reminds me of, or numbers to our pictures, starting now. About 15 more seconds. And there is our minute. How are we doing? Hope everybody's doing okay. You can take a moment to shake out your hands if you'd like as we get warmed up. Ready for plat number 2? Here we go. Once again, we'll take 2 minutes to draw what we can. And if the detail's overwhelming, again, you don't have to draw all of it. You can draw only part of it or draw small. And 2 minutes starting now. About 30 more seconds. And there's our 2 minutes. And then we'll take 1 extra minute to add any words, describing words, questions it reminds me of, observations, and numbers to our pictures, starting now. About 10 more seconds. All right. And there's our minute. How are we doing? Doing good? All righty. Here we go. Our final one. And whoop. There might be a distraction in the picture. um, so we'll take 1 more minute to draw what we can. Oh, sorry, 2 more minutes to draw what we can, starting. About 20 more seconds. All right. And we will take one final minute to add any words and numbers to our pictures, starting now. About 10 more seconds. And there's our minute. How are y'all doing? We're all doing okay? This is kind of, as you can see, this is a lot. Who finds this, all of the flowers we've drawn so far to be kind of a lot? Well, just so you know, it's not you. This is just what this family is all about. Who's ready to meet our family of the day? Yeah? All right, here we go. Welcome to the sunflower family. It's also known as the daisy family and the aster family, but officially welcome to Asteraceae. Um, Now, quick note, I will probably be pronouncing back and forth between Asteraceae and Asteraceae just because I've heard different people say it different ways. And so sometimes I'm not always consistent in how I pronounce them. But either way, this is our family. Um, a good way to think of it is to think of the word aster like star. That's kind of some fun etymology right there. Also, so not only is this one of the most complicated families that we're going to be seeing in the series, but it's also one of the biggest families. Asteraceae is known as either the biggest or second biggest family of plant families. Botanists aren't totally sure whether it's this one or whether it's orchids that are bigger, so we think that they're off, arm wrestling for the title somewhere in the woods. We still don't know. So this is our either biggest or second biggest plant family in the world. An old name for Asteraceae that's still commonly used as compositae. And that one's kind of a fun one because it's very straightforward. It's composite flowers. Folks might have noticed that there's kind of a lot going on in the middle of this plant, right? And there's a reason for that. There is a reason for that. This right here, how many flowers are you seeing right here? Here's a hint. It's not one. It's dozens, possibly even hundreds, if the size of this is any indicator. There are all sorts of little flowers hidden within this, and there's also flowers on the outsides too, but we'll be getting into that. This one is very clearly a sunflower. um, does anybody happen to know this one? And folks can unmute and call out if they'd like.
Is that a seaside daisy by any chance?
Not a seaside daisy, although I did consider putting that in there. It's same color scheme.
Yeah.
This one is the artist formerly known as Aster the California aster. Um, but they changed it. It's no longer Aster. It's now something like Symphoritrachum. They changed the name. They played musical plants with this genus. But this would have been the type genus a while ago. So yeah, this is California aster. And I saw a question about whether this is a mud dauber. I actually don't know which insect friend this is, but I thought it was extra cool seeing who was nectaring or feeding on our flower. Anybody know this one? It's very up close. Um, Flowers are a lot smaller in real life. This is kind of a fun one.
I was going to guess some kind of everlasting, like pearly everlasting. Well, it's not pearly everlasting, but some kind of everlasting.
It is. I think it's within the same tribe, possibly, but I'm not totally sure. But not pearly everlasting. This one is a very dear one to myself and a bunch of Californians. This is coyote brush. Specifically, these are the male flowers of the coyote brush. In this particular case, and in a few others, we have male flowers, or I guess we could say staminate flowers, flowers with stamens on one plant. And then, meanwhile, flowers with pistils would be on a different plant, so completely separate. And they call that dioecious, meaning two separate houses. But these are the staminate flowers, so they will produce all of the stamen, and then they cross-pollinate. So yeah, this is coyote brush. And then this one is also very localized. I don't know how widespread it is.
Tarweed.
It is, yes, it is tarweed. It is Pacific tarweed. So yeah, this is another lovely one. And I love this one specifically because you look inside and you can really, really see those individual flowers making up the bigger flower. So, and then as we'll see, there's a second kind of flower on the sides. So each of these petals right here is not actually just a petal, it's an entire flower. And we're going to be seeing more of that.
Maybe I have a question. What do you mean by inflorescence on this one?
Thank you for that. So when I'm saying inflorescence, I mean all of the flowers on the plant, or the group of flowers. And the reason why I will say that is because technically I can't call this a flower. This is flowers. So I just call it inflorescence. Inflorescence can also be a single flower, but in this case, that's why I wanted to use that word instead of just flower to say possibly multiple flowers. Thank you for that.
So I was wondering when we did the roses, did we see groups of flowers, or maybe I'm just misremembering that? Was there like maybe the California rose, like the pistils kind of look like flowers too? Maybe that's what I'm thinking, but um, yeah, it just kind of reminded me of something, and I'm looking through my sketchbook to figure out what it was.
I
Did
do
we
remember.
have one that had? Oh, maybe it was the brassica because they have the little pistils. But yeah, I'm just kind of wondering. Oh, like the broccoli, you know how it's got the smaller buds on them on the inside?
Yeah. So within each of those flowers, that's an entire, like each of the individual broccoli ones are an entire flower, but when we see the entire head of broccoli together, all of those unopened buds, that would be a future inflorescence. That would be eventually a whole bunch of flowers that would be opening up together. So yeah, whenever we see a big group of flowers, we can be saying, at least with the plant, we can say inflorescence. Although we can also mean just an individual. So that means all of the flowers on that plant, or the flowers on that plant.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions before we start to look at our anatomy? Here, we can start to look. So we start out with our basic diagram. I always like to start out with this, even though I keep on saying I'm going to redraw this someday, it's fine. Um, I like to start out with our basic diagram, just because then we can see how our family of the day will kind of alter from this. So our basic flower diagram that you might see in a textbook, except maybe differently drawn, is we've got our stem, we've got our sepals on the outside. Those are our leaf-like appendages that are on a lot of flowers, sometimes green, sometimes not. Um, and and these are for the protection of the rest of the flower. So that's why this is kind of the first layer. Um, when the flower's all closed up, then you'll be seeing usually the sepals kind of surrounding it. Our next layer is our petals. Usually we think of them as being very showy. Sometimes they smell nice, very attractive, maybe a good landing pad for an insect. But yeah, these are our petals. We've got our stamens as our next kind of whorl inside. And our stamens here are what produce our pollen. So we got our stamens that produce pollen. And then last but not least, this kind of vase-like structure in the middle here, that's our pistil. So that is where the seeds are made. And the way I remember that is PSSP. Pistils make seeds, stamens make pollen. PSSP. So this is kind of our standard flower diagram. And then I like to show from there what happens with our family of the day. And that's where it gets complicated because we're not looking at one flower from this family. We're going to be looking at two on our next slide. So there's actually two types of flowers in this family. Um, because it's called compositae, because this is a composite flower, that means it's a flower that is comprised of many smaller flowers, or it's an inflorescence comprised of smaller flowers. So we've got, at least in our standard members of this family, we've got our inner tiny flowers here are disc flowers. Think of it like the sun, so the center of it is the disc. And then on the outside, we've got the ones that have the showy petals, but each of those is an individual flower as well. So those are called ray flowers, like rays of the sun. So we've got two flowers that are inside of this family. Um, and all of them, the reason why we call it composite is because they're all growing on the same receptacle here, this kind of flat base. If you imagine a sunflower or a daisy, it all has the same kind of dish for all of the flowers to grow from. So that's why we call it a composite flower. It's sort of like a bunch of littler flowers disguised as one big one. It's just very cool. And we'll be going into a little bit more detail about each of them in just a moment. But I'll give folks a moment if they want to look at this and write it down, or any questions that people have as well. So we'll be getting more into the individual flowers in just a bit. Any questions so far? And yeah, I do apologize. This family is a doozy.
Yeah, Vea, I had a question about your diagram for Asteraceae. I noticed the disc flowers in the middle are unopened and the ones at the outer edge are open. Is that like the typical pattern?
That's what I've observed, but I highly encourage folks to make a friend with a flower from this family and watch it over time and see if you can watch when each of the flowers develop. It is really, really fun to see that some of flowers will be open and others are closed. And so that is a pattern that you can see. Although I think that it probably also varies from the species about what their timing is like. But it is a common thing that you can see in this family. And it's really fun to look at. So yeah. That is definitely on purpose. So yeah, these, as Jasmine's putting out, these are the unopened flowers, and then they open up, and then you see the certain parts of it emerge, which we'll get more into. So that is fun. And yep, I see Susan's observed that with dandelions. Are folks ready to look at some of the flowers closer? All right, we'll go slow. Here's the anatomy of our flower part two. We'll start on the inside at the disc flower. So the way we just talked about sepals, petals, um, stamens, and pistils. Our sepals are usually reduced here to the little hairs. So in this case, they're not really leaf-like appendages. They're little hairs. And that winds up being very useful when it's time to disperse the seeds. So, so these wind up, later on growing and kind of becoming the part that drifts away with the wind. So we've got our sepals in here, very small. And then we've got our petals here, and they're all fused together. And they make what we call a tubular corolla. And that pretty much just means that all of the petals are fused together. So these are all of the petals. Um, and then inside of there, one layer, are the stamens. And weirdly, the stamens are also fused together in this way, sort of like a fruit roll up, but with stamen bits kind of cut out of the top, which is kind of fun. So we've got our stamens also in here. And then above that, we've got part of our pistil sticking out. Um, and then the pistil kind of continues to down here. And so the pistil kind of runs up here in the middle. So this is our disc flower. So the flower on the inside that we might see. And so yeah, the seed fluff it comes from our sepals, I believe. So that's just one flower. And here's our second. And this is our ray flower. And so once again, sometimes we have hairs that count as sepals. Then we have our one petal. So instead of being kind of tubular like this one, we've got one showy petal kind of with kind of a strappy look to it. And a lot of times you'll notice on the edge of that one petal that it has teeth. It's kind of fun to look for the teeth. And sometimes the teeth are rounded. Sometimes the teeth are a lot smaller and very hard to see, but a lot of them in this family will have teeth. So that's our petal. And then sometimes depending on depending on whether you have a plant that has both of these, sometimes there may not be the stamens here, and sometimes on others there will, and I'll be getting more into that in a moment too. But in this case, if you've got both disc flowers and ray flowers, then the ray flowers might not have the stamens, and instead they might only have a pistil, which is kind of interesting. Just to be really complicated. Yeah, this family is extra, very extra. And I do apologize because this is very, yeah, a lot. Any questions so far?
Vea, is that bottom thing on the ray flower, is that an ovary?
Yep, it is. This would become a seed later on.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing. And I'm gonna try to check the chat for questions just to make sure I'm not missing anybody's questions.
Yeah, are the ray flowers sometimes sterile though? Because I thought I had heard that in some cases.
I believe that's true, yeah.
Cool.
That some of the ray flowers are sterile. but it's kind of neat. On some of our earlier family members who we drew, um, when you look very carefully at the petals on the outside, you can see the little pistil sticking up, which is really fun. We can look back at that in a bit too, if people would like. And so, yeah, this is kind of where they fit in. So this one is our disc flower on the inside here, just made a little bit bigger. And then this one's our ray flower on the outside. So you can see how they sort of fit into this. Also, if people are wondering, I'm definitely going to be getting this recording up as soon as I can. Just because I know that there's a lot of details to write down. Any other questions so far? Y'all ready for the next one? Or do folks need some more time? Not seeing any. I will. Here we go. I will go to the next one, but if folks need me to, I can also go back. So, my animation didn't work out. Okay. I apologize. This is kind of overwhelming. As again, the reason why I'm including this is because there are different forms of Asteraceae as well. It's not always the case that we're going to have a plant that has disc flowers and ray flowers, like our mock heather over here. In this one, you can really clearly see disc flower here and then ray flower here. Can everybody see that? Over here on the right. You can sort of see the fruit roll up looking. Um, um, actually, this looks like we have the petals that are opened here. So yeah, it looks like the petals have already opened on these. And then this would be, I believe, the stamens, and then maybe the pistils on top. And I'm actually not sure about the timing. It could be that the stamens mature at a different rate than the pistil so that the plant doesn't self-pollinate. That's probable. And then over here, you can see one of the ray flowers, and you can see that pistil sticking out right here. So there's that. The reason why I include these, though, is that this is a type of flower right here, over here with our Italian thistle. This one only has the disc flowers. So not all Asteraceae have both ray and disc flowers. This one is only made up of disc flowers. So that makes the anatomy on this one a little bit different. And then meanwhile, this one right over here, I think this is bristly ox tongue. This one only has ray flowers. You can see it's all strappy petals, but then it goes all the way to the center here. So there are different forms of Asteraceae just to make things extra complicated. Any questions so far? There's also something like 12 different tribes in this family. So if the plant is challenging, that's probably why. One question that I like to ask, especially if you live in, I want to say the northern hemisphere, at least not the tropics, is when you go out into the field and you're walking around and admiring all of the wildflowers and scrub and everything else, ask what out here is not from this family. Depending on where you are, everything you see, or at least a lot of what you see, might be from this family, just in different tricky forms. So there's this. Okay, gonna go to, you don't have to write down this whole list. You can add this as notes to your diagrams, but just sometimes it helps to look over the key characteristics. So we've got dozens of small flowers growing into one big inflorescence or composite flower. We've got small flowers that all grow on one head. So if they were growing on different little heads, then they wouldn't necessarily be from this family. Often we've got small seeds with parachutes to make wind distribution a bit better. So think dandelion. Think about the way that you can grab a dandelion head and blow, and then all of those little parachutes will go off into the wind. Very lovely. Then we have two types of flowers within a composite flower, usually, unless it's one of the special ones, like we just saw. We have the disc flowers, which are the inner part of the, if you imagine a sunflower, those are the inner flowers of the sunflower. And then you've got ray flowers, which are the outer petals, which is actually an entire flower each. And because this plant likes to be complicated, this whole family is complicated, not all of the Asteraceae will have both types. Some will have both, some might have only ray flowers, and some will have only disc flowers. And the important thing is to let the plant that's in front of you tell you. So if you see a whole bunch of flowers disguised to look like one big flower, there's a really good chance you're looking at an Asteraceae. Any questions so far? I want to make sure I'm not missing people. I hope I'm not going too fast as well. Um, People can unmute as well and call out if they'd like. I want to make sure I'm not missing anybody or going too fast. How are we all doing? Doing okay? All right. Give folks one more moment and then we'll go on. And I agree with you, Rebecca. Instead of compositaceae, it should have been complicataceae. It's very true. This in sign language, I think that this is the word for complicated. You have two little people walking past each other. Yeah, this family is very, very complicated, but also fun. It's also really fun to sitting. If you ever get a chance to sit next to one for a long time when they're in bloom, it's fun to see who shows up. You get a really big diversity of insects who show up to pollinate these guys. Probably because instead of having just one flower to get nectar from, they have a whole bunch of flowers to get nectar from, all mixed up into one. Also, good news for folks who like to give sunflowers to people as gifts. You've officially just handed somebody an entire bouquet instead of just one flower. All right, here, we'll move on to the next one. And this is the one I love people to call out. Which family members do we eat, do you think? Who do we eat? And it's okay to guess. Some of them might be surprising, and others might not. I see artichoke as a guess. Yes, we do. Artichoke is from this family. What else?
Sunflower seeds.
Yes. Yes, sunflower seeds. Mhm. Asparagus is not this one, but asparagus is another really huge one, and we are going to get to asparagus later. It's going to be fun.
Are you thinking of artichoke? Because I was definitely thinking artichoke, but was almost going to say asparagus.
But yes, artichoke. Definitely artichoke and dandelion leaves. Yep. Yeah, asparagus or artichoke. I think it was probably artichoke. Yep, the artichoke. Y'all ready to see?
Lettuce.
Yep, lettuce. That's the one that's really fun and a surprise to people.
It's funny
Lettuce.
because I always sort of think of lettuce as like, oh well, it's kind of like a cabbage, but it's totally different.
Exactly. Then you see the lettuce bolt. If you ever let lettuce go to seeds, then you see that they make the fluff just like all of the dandelions that we're used to. So these are what we eat from this family. Not as big of a list as maybe Fabaceae, but still pretty good. So we eat lettuce, we eat chicory, which I think is sort of type of lettuce. We eat the sunflower seeds, we drink chamomile tea. We use echinacea sometimes for our medicine. We have artichokes. And if you're in certain places, like I want to say Italy, then you might also eat cardoons, which are very closely related to artichokes. We have our sweetener stevia. We have tarragon, and some people will eat or will have thistle milk as health properties. So some of these are surprising, I'm guessing. Who else got surprised by lettuce?
Yeah. Oh, Ivea, also chrysanthemum.
Yes, we can eat chrysanthemums.
So, okay, yeah. So, chrysanthemum, if I go to a dim sum restaurant, that's the tea I will order versus the black tea. Because that's what I would have when I was very little, because the other tea is caffeinated and chrysanthemum tea is not caffeinated. And the other really interesting thing about chrysanthemum tea, it's also called in Mandarin, it's called like country tea, meaning it's kind of the flower of China.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and I just realized that it's aster right now. So, wow.
That is awesome. Okay, that's exciting and that's new for me to know. I never knew that you could have chrysanthemum tea before. And so and that's a flower that's special to China. So that's really, really good to know. That's exciting. That is really exciting. Does anybody else have any other ones that I didn't mention here? Because I love learning about new ones that we eat. Any questions before we go on to the last part of our class?
How about some of the oils, like safflower oil? Is that
Good point. I bet you're right. I actually don't remember. I don't know safflower. I haven't ever seen safflower, but I'm betting you're right. I'm betting, yeah, that's true. We might have some of the oils that we eat too. And actually, I'm going to write that down so that I can research that later on, because that's a really, really good point about safflower oils. Thank you for that, Carmen. Yeah, I'll look up some of the oils. Any others? Any others that folks can think of? No? Any questions before we go on to spot the family member? Who's ready? All right, here we go. Let's play Spot the Asteraceae. And this is a reminder to folks that this is not to, like, the point of this quiz is not necessarily to get the right answer, although that's fun too. It's more to look and question, why do I think it's this instead of that? And then to get more used to looking at plants in the field, especially because plants are tricksy. Let's see here, and I'm going to go look at polls and quizzes. If the polls and quizzes disappear, then you can click on more on your Zoom settings, and then it should say polls and quizzes, and then you can reselect it if you need. I think almost everybody's answered too. And also these are anonymous, so yeah. And it looks like so far everybody's agrees on the answer. Y'all ready to see? A 1, a 2, and a 1, 2. B. B is the one. What told folks that B is our Asteraceae? And I'd love for folks to unmute and call out if you'd like. What told folks that it was B?
So B's gonna, like, I mean, it's impossible to distinguish like the florets in there because it's just a whole mess. But you can see there it looks like a cluster of a bunch of pink petals with a little sharp thing in the middle, maybe, or something like that. In each case, so I can almost convince myself that I can see the little thing of the stamen in amongst, surrounded by some petals, quote unquote, all through there, and so it has that structure. Whereas the other, C is also very spiky, but it looks like it's just stamens. Yeah.
Yep, exactly. See over here, we've got very distinctive flowers on C, where instead of it being totally clustered together like in here, it seems to all be on the same stick, but it's not necessarily on the same head or on the same flower head. So we've got, and yes, they are indeed comprised of all stamens in this case. And the pistil, there are pistils in here too, but they're quite well hidden. Whereas exactly like Susan is saying, we can sort of see some flower parts, although it's kind of hard to distinguish. Seeing one right there that looks sort of like a pistil. What told people that A was not the one?
It looks like a rose to me. I don't know.
It has more the feeling of a rose. Sometimes see that's a great thing, because sometimes the it reminds me of can help us to think, oh, why is this one not quite right? Because it feels more like a different family. In this particular case, I also thought it was a rose. This one happens to be from the geranium family, but I couldn't tell because there's a particular characteristic I look for in the geranium family that is hard to see here. A particular thing that happens with the pistil. But it does remind me, like with Clara saying, it reminds me also more of a rose than it does of a big old mess cluster. So that is, and yeah, process of elimination is another way of doing it. Any other observations or questions before we go to round 2?
I was just going to note that with A, like, I think there are some Asteraceae that have that where the ray florets are kind of broad like that,
Mm-hmm.
but you'd still see like actual flowers in the center, not just the pistils there or the stamens. I'm sorry. Like you would still see like a cluster of like actual flowers that have a little hollow spot in the center, maybe. You know, you wouldn't see just the stamen sticking out like that.
Exactly, you'd see little flowers here. Another thing is that you'd be more likely as well to see little teeth here on the edge of each petal, if this were from our family of the day. I don't necessarily know that all of them have the little tooth, but the ones I've observed seem to have little teeth. Sometimes just hard to find. So yeah.
I'm I'm wondering about this thistle.
Hmm.
First of all, I'm really surprised that this is in the same family, and it has sort of like a lot of hair, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
I called this ghost thistle. I didn't know what it was called. I think I made it up. I called
that's
it
a
ghost
wonderful
thistle.
name.
But yeah, it really. I was wondering about that. Does what's the function of all the hair? And it's also very spiky, right? Like you don't want to touch this one.
Definitely true about the spikes, and I honestly have no idea about the hairs. I think that's a wonderful question, and that's definitely the sort of one that it'd be fun to either come up with a why web about it and think about some of the functions it can serve, or research or observe. But I don't know, and I think that's a really great question. Does anybody happen to know, or have anybody read any good theories about it? Because that's the fun thing too, is that we can say that, oh, it's because of this, but there could be just different theories. And the only way of really knowing is to watch and see how it interacts with the environment. So I think
I
that's a
was
really, really
wondering, there's a lot of plants in like dry and desert environments that have either like very, very, I guess, I don't know if cetaceous is the word because that would be an insect word, but lots of long hairs, or that kind of, there are some like succulents that have that kind of really, cobwebby kind of look. And I wonder if it's like for water retention or something, or
that's
to
a
like
great,
to break the wind so that I don't mean to break wind, but so that like wind passing over doesn't actually suck all the water away from it or something.
to protect against desiccation.
Mm-hmm.
That's a brilliant idea. Maybe so. Or maybe because of the white colors of this, it acts as well a little bit like a sunblock. So that way it reflects really high amounts of sunlight off so that the plant doesn't turn into a crisp. Or it also could be for warmth. Maybe it traps some of the air so that way in really cold environments at nighttime. I honestly have no idea. I love this. These are the kind of conversations that I love because it just gives us so many ideas about what could be happening here. And then I love that Susan related it to what she'd seen in the desert. Thank you. That's a really great question, Clara. Thank you for that. You all ready for round two? Here we go. Round two. Let's see if did the quiz load or not yet?
Oh,
Oh, here
sorry.
it
I
is.
was asleep at the wheel.
No worries.
I
And
mean,
thank you.
sorry, that doesn't sound right. I was just not paying attention to that.
No worries. And again, huge thank you to Jasmine for being my amazing co-host and helping me wrangle all of the logistics of this class. Thank you. And again, this is just for fun and for practice. More important than getting the answer right is to question, why do I think it's this and not that? And this one, if it feels tricky, it's because it is. I think almost everybody's answered. Y'all ready to see the answer? Oh, everybody answered. Fantastic. All right, ready? A one, a two, and a one, two, C. And this one was tricky on purpose. It's actually C. Now, instead of just asking immediately why we can tell C is, let's start over here. How could we tell that A wasn't our family member? What did we see that makes it different from our family?
So A's got what you could interpret as a bunch of disc florets, but they're all on their own stems.
Mm.
And that's
Exactly.
not what we'd see. I'm guessing, is
Exactly.
that APAC?
It is. Yes.
Ah,
And Susan is having a bit of foreshadowing for our family next week. This is going to be our family next week, is APACA right here. So yep, each of them, each little flower here, this is indeed each individual flowers, but they each have their own stem in an umbel. And we'll talk more about that next week. So yep, exactly. What tells people that B is not the one? And that one's tricky on purpose.
The leaves, or I don't know if they're leaves, they're more like cactus thingies. So, or succulent.
Or succulent leaves. I actually don't know if members of Asteraceae have succulent leaves or not. I have to think through, but it could be. That could be a diagnostic. What about inside of our flower? I know it looks like it should be because of the very strappy looking petals here, but it's not.
You got that one big, weird, tentacle-looking pistil in the middle. So it's one flower and a million stamens, and that
Exactly.
creepy pistil. Was that
Exactly.
nice?
It is ice plant. Yes, it is, which is from a family called Azoaceae. Also, we have these strappy petals, but we don't have the teeth in them. So it doesn't quite feel right. And yep, indeed, we've got a big old pistil in the middle and a whole bunch of stamens, as opposed to pistils all throughout. So that's another diagnostic. What tells people that C is R1? And again, no wrong answers. It's more about talking about why we see it as one and the other. And one thing I've noticed, oh yeah, and sorry, and then I see Robin was going to say something. I'll let you go first, Robin.
I was just going to say that, I stuck with reminds me of, right?
Mhm.
To look for the characteristics. And I was thinking it reminded me of a flower from the daisy family. So, but they were tricksy today, especially A. And I looked at the petals there, but yeah, I went with Z because it reminded me of the daisy families, sunflower family.
I was going to add to that. I mean, B also reminds me very much. It looks a lot like our sort of like daisy fleabanes that we have because of the very, very thin, lots of thin petals. And both B and C have like sort of a furry, broad center, and B, the furriness is made of the stamens. And C, I was like, well, it could be stamens, but looking closely, you can see that the very, very center has a bunch of little bumps, which I think are the unopened disc florets. And you would not have that if those were just stamens, they would just all be sticking up. So it has to be disc florets in the center that haven't been opened, and disc florets on the outside that make a sort of a general fuzziness that are open.
Exactly. That's a really good analysis. I also know that this one is a bit hard to see because I'm realizing that I maybe I could have had a picture that was in better relief, but you can see some of the stamens, the stamen fruit roll-ups kind of sticking up here. I don't know why I call them fruit roll-ups. It just makes me happy for some reason. But yeah, we have got the fruit roll-ups sticking up here and all over. And then, like Susan was saying, in the middle, it's not opened yet. So that's a really good analysis of what makes a fuzzy center. Is it a bunch of pistils or is it a bunch of flowers in the center? So that's a good analysis. It's challenging though. This is challenging on purpose. Also, it's hard to see the teeth on the edges of each of the petals here, but you can sort of see them in some of them, depending on which way it is. There's little teeth right in here, and right in here, but it is hard to see. Are you all ready for round 3? Final round? All right, here we go. Final round. It's okay if this is tricky. Again, this is only because plants are tricksy. I myself had to ask some questions about one of the others in this one.
I think you can take credit for some tricksiness yourself though.
Maybe. But I
Trixie
like
Trouts.
one of my favorite things though is to introduce ones to people that I myself struggled with, because then I can relate to the struggle and it helps me analyze better why is this hard. I think almost everybody has answered. All right. And I apologize again for the tricksiness. Y'all ready to see? A one and a two and a one, two, see. Yarrow. And yes, this was tricksy on purpose. Very tricksy. So, what tells us that C is our family member? What are we seeing here that screams Asteraceae?
In some of the spots of the photo, you can see the tiny little cups that look like the disc flowers. It's hard to see, but then you can see like a little stamen poking out.
Yeah.
Yeah, like that one.
Yep. You can see the tiny little flower in this one. And then each of them, even when you see the stamens, it looks as though they're surrounded by a little sea of petals. And they are.
And the
Meanwhile,
notches in the petals,
yes,
notches in the petals, that was the definitive thing for me.
the teeth. Yep, you
Yeah.
can see the teeth of the aura. And also you can see, I forgot to go into a rant about bracts, but also there are bracts on the outsides. The bits that we might think of as being sepals, they're not, because of course the sepals are, all tucked in here and going to turn into the hairs most likely. I mean, to the are hairy most likely, but on the outside, these green leafy bits are bracts. And I'm going to rant about bracts when we talk about grasses later. But yeah, so yeah, exactly. We've got the teeth, we've got the little tiny cups of flowers in here, and then the stamens sticking out.
So I think it's really in most cases it's the whole cluster of little tiny flowers that you can tell because there's sort of a dark hollow to the center of the flowers, surrounded by some big, you know, what you might think of as petals, but are actually the right florets. Um,
Yeah,
so like there's other plants that have clusters of little flowers, but that aren't surrounded by something, and they're all on their own little stems.
that's a really good way of thinking of it too. Yep, like a whole bunch of whole bunch of flowers, or a little group of flowers then surrounded by bigger petals. That's a really great way of thinking of it. Now, what told people that B was not the one? It has a fuzzy center, but what's missing?
There's a lot of sorry, not petals, pistils. Is it?
Yep, yep, there are a lot of pistils, but the pistils are, it's kind of hard to see sometimes in the light, but the pistils are all emanating from the center equally as opposed to being spread out among littler flowers. They're all emanating from the fuzzy center. And some of you will recognize this family, I think. It's a family we've seen before at the very beginning.
Is it Rosaceae?
It is. It is from the rose family. It's got
It
our fuzzy
looks
center.
like I think I always get mixed up with the common names, but I think meadowsweet is something we have around here. Ah, Asteraceae thing. I wonder if that's what it is related to.
It might be related. I actually don't know meadowsweet. I can tell you that this one I know as ocean spray. It's a lovely plant, lovely creamy flowers, also sometimes called cream bush, hollow discus discolor. But now I want to look up meadowsweet. And yes, there is a little distraction on the ocean spray. You're absolutely right about that. What tells us that this one's not? Now, this one was tricky on purpose, and I actually had to sit there and question, why isn't this one part of this family? Because it looks like there's all of these little flowers on this one head. So why wouldn't this be part of that family?
It's very round, like kind of like a globe shape, sphere shape, and I think this one's actually Cleveland sage, isn't it?
It is definitely one of the sages. I don't know which one. We met it up in the
Yeah.
Sierra. I want to say it might be mountain coyote mint or something like that. Monardella, something in
Wait,
there.
that's a mint?
Mm-hmm.
With those
Monardella.
flowers?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I know,
Cool.
hard to believe, right? It does not look like it if it's the
Yeah.
pattern of
I
where
was
you
just
stay.
thinking I ruled out Asteraceae because the little unopened buds are they're not I would expect them to be like more closely packed. Like they don't have to be on a flat plane, but they should be on like a rounded thing, really tightly packed. And it seemed like there was enough gap there that I could convince myself that it was that they have their own little stems and they aren't like packed into one little flower.
That's a good way of thinking of it. If this were an Asteraceae, we might expect to see maybe one cluster of unopened buds, and then it being surrounded by a circle of opened buds, sort of like in a progression, the way that Jasmine was observing earlier. But instead, we've got some open and then unopened, and then some opened and unopened, without it being sort of emanating from the center, the way Susan is describing. Um, Now, of course, why this is in Lamiaceae when it doesn't look like it, that's another question for another day. This one looks very different, but this is indeed in Lamiaceae, our family from last week. Um, any other observations or questions about these?
I was wondering about some of the smells from some of these flowers, right? So yarrow, if you touch the leaves, it's got like a very memorable smell.
Mhm.
Oh, I think you could have yarrow tea too.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, I
Yeah,
should have added that.
yeah, yarrow tea.
So I wouldn't risk it, but I wonder if most of this family is edible, but just not necessarily a flavor that you'd want, or maybe it is, but I'm not just going randomly eating all of them, but I do kind of wonder if it's just kind of generally edible, but of varying flavor.
I wonder
Yeah,
too,
It's like
but
most of the mint family you can eat, but some of it you wouldn't want to.
and some of these don't have a smell either, or at least not one
Like
that's
yarrow
strong.
administration.
flowers do have a kind of a it's one of those smells that you get in like a perfume. Sometimes it's sort of like the sort of heavy bass note kind of smell, but it's weird. I can't describe it. I don't know. I can't describe it. Yeah, musty smell. Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, yeah. I'm seeing Sarah describing it as being a musty smell, and
I can't
um,
think of any of these I've smelled that actually smell like sweet and nice. Yeah, I think about it.
I personally have a liking for the smell of coyote brush, but I'm biased.
I haven't smelled it, so. Yeah. And of course, the leaves might have different smells that are nice, but just thinking the flowers, like I don't mind the smell, but like a lot of rosaceous flowers have a very sweet smell,
Yeah.
like roses. So interesting.
Whereas you think of things like sagewort and mugwort, which are part of this family as well, as having this kind of earthy medicinal smell almost,
Yeah,
depending on how it's used.
well, apparently it works because the pollinators come to it. So
And some of them are really high in certain oils too, and that actually, yeah, so maybe that attracts them, or maybe it's also their way of protection from predations. So many questions.
Yeah, a lot of questions, and apparently, so like mugwort's an interesting one. I didn't realize that was in this family,
Mhm.
in which I learned this summer if you put mugwort under your pillow, you better be prepared not to sleep well.
I've
So,
heard I've heard the same thing with drinking mugwort tea, and I can, well, maybe I just hyped myself up, but I did drink it and had some really crazy, weird dreams that I couldn't escape
ooh,
from, that were kind of scary. I
it's
apologize. I'm
good.
actually realizing that I went over time a bit. So I know we've got to finish up real fast. But I also want to say that if anybody's had questions that we weren't able to answer in this class, that's excellent. Please write them down and keep those questions because this is meant to be kind of an opening to plants, not the finale to the plants. This is meant to help us get more into it. So the more questions, the better, because that means that you and plants will have a long conversation ahead when you have more questions. Um, Quickly to recap, our Asteraceae family here has got two types of flowers generally. Our ray flowers on the outsides and our disc flowers on the insides, unless you're dealing with one that only has ray flowers or only has disc flowers, because it's kind of the way that this family goes. Each flower head has got dozens of individual small flowers situated on a receptacle. So this would actually be an entire bouquet right here in our drawing, even though it looks like it's only a single flower. We've got one main stem here that connects all of them, which is how you know that it's not just a different family. And the small seeds will have individual parachutes. And that is our class. And I do apologize for going over a little bit. Um, if anybody has got questions or ideas, you can always email me, or I'll be in Pencil Miles and chill for a bit after this. But I hope that that was okay. How's everybody doing? Everybody want to shake out their hands? Everybody doing okay? Major props, you guys dealt with probably one of the most complicated families that we're going to deal with. So give yourselves a huge round of applause. Get yourself something nice, like a good treat or something like that. This was fun. Um, it is really lovely to see all of you. And I will hopefully see you all again soon. And one more huge thank you to Jasmine for being my amazing co-host. You all take care. Sorry I didn't have more time for questions at the end.